Diccimene, ma qua. Scherzavo comunque, era per fartelo un po' menare. Piedi in testa, aspettiamo il messaggio, dico. Colpito e affondato. Guarda mia reaction trailer Spider-Man Spider 2 italiano, mio canale YouTube Michel Decanta. Guarda mia, guarda mia reaction trailer. Draghi, guarda mia reaction trailer Spider Davide Michel sei come uno squalo. Andiamo con reaction, non perdiamo tempo. Sfruttatore a rivista. Niente fa. Oh, oh, ma, mamma Michelle. Eh sì, io adesso devo sentire. Non avete, non l'avete già fatta? Perché era carico? Nessuno aveva, nemmeno lui lo ha guardato. Si sta incazzando perché non c'è. Broccolo, vorrei parlare con Broccolo. Ha detto Michel che gli hai detto vaffanculo e live dai colli. Vergognati, Purina. Sto già procedendo. Disrespect. Michel Banno. Michel, dimmi un tempo e sarà immortata. Bene, non sapevo se rimasta anche su Kick. Assurdo, 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 assurdo. Sesto titolo tu e sta leggendo la chat. Ciao caro. Non ci credo. Michel, dimmi un saluto, un saluto. In che senso streama su Kick? A lui, un saluto a lui. Ti fa un saluto. Un saluto. Ai ai. Un saluto. Grande Vanni. Non trovo il tuo, non trovo il tuo. Nell'ultimo video, nell'altro video. Bene, react a VANNIGIO che distrugge la maglietta di Lucchio 4316. Ma almeno sta dicendo qualcosa oppure non parla. Carissimo Vanni, buonasera. Sta parlando con voi della chat. Vanni, che tipo di matita è quella? Vanni, il web ti fa male. A te, ex group. È casato. Segnale SIC. Ci legge solo da qua. Se lo facesse su Twitch rischierebbe i ban. Viva Kick, piattaforma di libertà. Un contenuto live assurdo. Prima volta nelle piattaforme internazionali. Uella! Vanni, un balletto. Primo in Italia per stream e matite Forza Vanni. Bene, non sapevo che avevi una regia dietro alle live. Quando farai live con Blur e Totti, Vanni? Ah ah ah. Bene, stoppa la registrazione. Beh, 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 beh. Bellissimo spoilerese. Vanni è il nuovo text aspect di questa live. Let's go. Forza tutti con le matite in mano, come on se vola. Bene, non compro più nessun bit, c'è Vanni che legge tutto. Assurdo Vanni come voce per l'accessibilità. E saluta sempre, tato patato. Sì, test per vedere se legge. Ha letto anche tato patato. Leggi questo tis, non fallo, bellissimo, sa, prova. Tato patato, 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 tato patato. Io scriverò il nome di Vanni sotto subs. Marche, conta fino a tre. Wide. Volevo il Vanni il TTS. Bello sto cinema. Tato patato, davvero? Restream Restream, Pog. Legge meglio di te. Ora la matita, la matita. Tutto. Leggi questo tizio. Vanni sempre con la parola pronta. Parola, no parola, che dici SPA. Tato patato. Ma che cavolo è su tato patato? Siccome Vanni è impazzito, il web mi fa bene. 33 trentini entrarono in 30, tutte 33, trotellando 33 trentini entrarono in Trento, tutte 30, trotellando 30.333 trentini entrarono in Trento, tutte 33, trotellando. Police, minga, pure il TTS con la via assurda. No, quello non lo dico Millennium. Anche se lo sarebbe Millennium 03. Raghi, gode con 15, incredibile, nuova intelligenza artificiale, Millennium, Millennium è top, Millennium cazzo fai? Vanni è un vero top streamer, ragazzi. Sì, l'elicottero cosa, e ti sei dimenticato di me, però vai a prendere in giro con le parole, parlare in altre live, vero Renicottero Fosa? Se l'arcivescovo di Costantinopoli si disorcivisco, ma come cavolo dice quello ex group? Vanni parliamone, Vanni parliamone, sì, Renicottero cosa. Ricordati che una volta ti ho visto, c'ho ancora lo screenshot del tuo viso, Renicottero Fosa, se non lo sai. Lo faccio vedere adesso, Renicottero Fosa, se non ne parliamo in Discord, anche adesso? Millennium gode con 15. Ciao Sick, ciao chat FreeX, un saluto speciale a Michelle De Canta e a Racchi, un bacio a tutti, siete i miei amori. Ma che dite? Che dici? Ricordatevi che chi ti vuole, ricordatevi, chi ti vuole più bene della mamma e del padre, o lui ti inganna o lui è pazzo. E siccome non c'è quasi nessuno, e siccome non c'è quasi nessuno nel 99,9% che non ti vuole bene e non è così pazzo da volerti bene, allora il 99,9% ti inganna quando ti dice una persona che ti vuole bene. Io non ho mai indicato a nessuno che lo voglio bene, lo rispetto a tutti, ma io voglio bene solo a mio padre, a mia madre e a mia sorella. Gli altri li rispetto al massimo, più del rispetto non posso dargli. Poi ci sono, come dicevo, ma oltre quelli che, quei pochi che mi sono rimasti, quei pochissimi che mi sono rimasti, che li rispetto molto di più. L'acqua è bellissima, vabbè, Exo. Te la potevi risparmiare pure. Ancora, ancora, ancora. A posto di dire fatti un account Exo e supportami anche qua su Kick. A posto di supportare persone che mi hanno denigrato su un Discord, mi hanno sottovalutato e tutto. Ti sembra che non lo sappia che sono bannato da SIC? E ti sembra che non l'abbia capito? E ti sembra che no, e ti sembra che non l'abbia capito Raki, specialmente Raki, sì, Raki, che mi spia, che è stato bottato negli ultimi 2 giorni, sì, che con migliaia di spette, e avete dato la colpa a me? Sottovalutatemi, sottovalutatemi. Ancora, giorno per giorno, anche domani, tutta la vita a sottovalutarmi. Sbagliate di grande. Tu dici sì? Mm, mm. Voglio crederci, è diverso, eh? Sto dicendo voglio crederci, non sto dicendo che ci credo, però dico voglio crederci. E lasciatemi quel dubbio. Io, Exo è stato quello che è stato, ha scritto che a me web in modo molto serio, davanti a 300-400 persone, oltre wide, ha detto che a me il web mi fa male. E io dichiaro adesso, se mi portate qualcuno che conoscete voi, che con tanto di laurea, scritto e timbro della Repubblica dello Stato Italiano, eccetera, eccetera, con tanti certificati e timbri che mi attesta che a me il web mi fa male, mollo il web per sempre. Ma se lo dici tu, bro, Exo, ma hanno scritto nella chat, ma hanno scritto, sì, che però devono essere sinceri con te. È inutile che ti dicono che ti vogliono bene e poi ti ingannano dicendo che non hanno scritto sulla chat di White. Quando ha fatto, è successo di nuovo, è l'ultima volta con quel titolo di White della live. E hanno scritto alcuni tuoi utenti e moderatori su White. Ho capito, ho capito. Voglio crederci, voglio crederci. Bene, Zic, io pensavo, dopo quella live che ho fatto a Cerbero, pensavo che queste persone che mi erano vicine mi supportavano. Invece no, sono andate contrarie. Per me è stata seria. Mettiamolo qua perché vedo che la tua chat non sta gradendo questa cosa. Oh, vabbè. 7 live, quando ho fatto 7 live? Mi stai dicendo sì che di allontanarmi da tutto? Da tutti? Ma io sono positivo, ma sono negativo, ma penso positivo. Certamente. È qualcosa di mio. Tipo allontanarmi, diciamo non citare più. Me la penserò. Sì. Ti sto ascoltando, ti sto ascoltando. Raki, ce ne sono tanti. Va bene. Ciao, ciao. Tieni giù quel braccio, no, dobbiamo alzarli. Alza il braccio, alza le braccia. Eh.
Not saying this to brag, but just to kind of add to the chat to basically the kind of I do know sort of what I'm talking about is that I have credits in The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. I've worked on Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as well as Watch Dogs Legion, and I'm currently working on the Call of Duty franchise. So when I started talking about that on Twitch, I started kind of seeing a lot more people asking about it, and then asking about how to be able to make their streams more accessible. And I really kind of like it was just diving in because I was already making content that was accessible to begin with. I just started utilizing that in my streams, whether it's adding captions or whenever I'm posting social clips, making sure those had subtitles, or also alt text for images, so that blind users can be able to know what the image actually is, and and then also being able to be open for any request that happens or any question that happens in chat about accessibility. It's being able to just pause and just sort of okay, and then answer those questions and then keep playing the game. But also also using the game as kind of an example too. Like, here's what it could do, and here's what it'd be great if they did this better or that better, or it's great that they do this and this. So it's kind of turned into like like a combination of a bunch of different things that that I love, and just and I got to do that all on Twitch for sure.
I love that. It's interesting because when you look at a lot of the conversations that happen on the internet, um, let's just say gaming or the gaming community is quite polarized, I would say, when it comes to concepts of accessibility. Like there were the debates happening when it comes to what was it, like marking ledges or climbing areas in certain ways visually, like with yellow paint.
Yeah.
They're like, well, how dare you do this thing that ruins our gaming experience and stuff like that. But it's similar, I think, in comparison to when you're broadcasting on Twitch. The assumption is that you have the opportunity to reach a global audience. And so if you're keeping that in mind, you want to be thinking, how can I make my show the best it possibly can be for any potential audience member that may step in? This may be a person who may need an accessibility toolkit or some means to access or enjoy your show that's a little bit different than what you may be used to. So you have to think through these considerations of what audience am I wanting to have come in? Am I creating a show that's accessible? And all of those things, it's just like by gatekeeping or saying I'm not going to deliver to those audiences, you're just putting a roof over your head and saying I will not deliver to those crews. And I think that's something that we really have to think about as we're broadcasting. I know there was a question that came in from InQ regarding closed captions. I know a lot of broadcasters are starting to include closed captioning. You can ingest it directly from OBS and it will,
Mhm.
you can toggle it on or off as a viewer. I guess, what are your thoughts on like, is there a great toolkit that like you're using currently, let's just say even on your OBS, that's like, hey, this is easy to set up, reads from the mic, etc., like for closed captionings, just to open that door for viewers who may want to have it on? Is there like anything
Yeah.
you could recommend in that line?
I think the one that I personally recommend the most is, as you mentioned, there is a plugin that you can be able to use in OBS called like Cloud Caption or Cloud Caption plugin. It uses the Google API to auto transcribe everything that's being said, and you can select the source of where it's transcribing from, and it's pretty accurate. It's probably the most accurate I've ever seen. I don't like no shade on YouTube, but we literally call their auto captions craptions because they're just how bad they can be. But with this, it's like it is extremely accurate. And what's great about that plugin is it is sort of a setup and just for set it and forget it, because but you can do so much more with it. You can actually it does ingest into, like you said, the Twitch player. So anytime that I stream, basically you can see the little closed caption button on the player, and you'll click that, and it's pulling in that information from OBS. So you don't need an extension on Twitch to be able to do it. But what's also great too is that you can be able to save the subtitle file. So if you want to be able to download that VOD and edit it, and you want to be able to have add captions to it, well, you already have a subtitle file that you can just insert into your editor or import it, and then it will have everything that you said, and it will basically add that as a subtitle track. But what's great too is that even if you do create clips or highlights once the VOD is done, it will save that captions as well. So it's like I said, it's literally kind of a set it and forget it. And you can also see how well it does when you're actually talking, and you can see how accurate it can be. And you can just sort of set it even just like, hey, once you start broadcasting or even start recording, it'll just start and it'll just do it all for you. That's probably the one I recommend the most. For those who are not necessarily using OBS, there are a few other sort of like web-based caption software that is out there, ingesting sort of Google Meets and kind of creating that as a sort of an overlay, a browser overlay that you can be able to bring in, especially if you have like multiple folks on. You can be able to have them basically like they'll have their own sort of speaker tag, and you can be able to see or hear exactly what is being said and see it pull up on there, and you can just add that as a browser source if you're using something like Streamlabs or anything like that. But if you're using OBS, that is the one plugin that I always recommend. It's just OBS Cloud Captions, and that's the one that just I've been using now for probably about a year, and it works great.
I love it. I love it. And some of the folks were, taking notes on what we were highlighting there. And I do want to address a particular viewer here. Turtle Verified and Geo are kind of naysayers currently during today's show. I want to call attention to what they're highlighting is like, why are we listening to the two of us today? And who are we to give advice? And this is what I want to say to every broadcaster out there is there are broadcasters of all walks of life from all corners of the world. You will not know every single broadcaster that's been out there or who's popular. In fact, who you think is popular is likely unpopular in most other countries. When you think about it, celebrity exists in certain areas. And for both of us, we've had professional careers that have carried, for both of us, 20 years. And so there's an importance when you think of who you listen to, who you don't listen to. You all have the choice on the internet what streams you watch, what you don't watch. You are the viewer who can make that choice. And so I just want you to, give and encourage the peers around you, all of the other broadcasters here, listen to their insights. You may learn something. You may learn something from somebody else in the chat today. So I would love to dive into sort of, how you're approaching, to get back on topic, the accessibility conversation. You launched a new show when it comes to the Dungeons and Dragons space. I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit here.
Yeah. So actually, funny enough, I am wearing the brand new merch shirt. It's for a show that I do called Dungeons and Disableds. I've been a fan of the TTRPG space for a long time, kind of going back into our experience in the space. I had actually an actual play podcast back in 2012 before they really kind of became a popular thing. I don't want to say I pioneered it because I definitely didn't, but it was like that's where we kind of were able to jump into the TTRPG space. So I've had experience in that, and I love watching all the actual play that is sort of blown up on Twitch and just on YouTube in general as well, or just in podcasting in general as well. And I kept seeing that there wasn't really a lot of space for folks who are disabled, whether that's seeing disabled representation as far as players, but also in regards to characters as well. I remember I think probably the only first time I saw that actually being displayed was actually in Critical Role when Matt had introduced an NPC that was in a wheelchair and was using a homebrew mechanic that was created by Mark Thompson called the combat wheelchair, and it basically utilizes everything within all the the mechanics of D&D and kind of integrate that into a wheelchair that is usable by NPCs. But a lot of folks had like different sort of opinions about it and different questions about it, but I was like, I still didn't see any representation of that. So I was like, you know what? I want to be able to try to not only be able to create a space that is representative of the folks in the community who just love playing D&D and just love great stories, and also represent characters who are also disabled, but just being able to have also an accessible a D&D show as well. And so the idea I've had for like 2 years was, just literally just the name Dungeons and Disableds. And the only rule I had was that, okay, this cast has to be disabled and I will be the dungeon master. And I've had that idea for about 2 years. And then as kismet as it would happen, I got to meet Matt Mercer at the Game Awards this past December. And I asked him for advice, like, how do you run that at the table? And he gave me such encouragement and advice. For like we talked for like quite a while, and it was so inspirational.
E you know,
Moment
open
that I
your
was like,
URL,
been thinking about
having
this for 2 years.
what
I
the
need to make
full
this happen.
day.
So
In your
beginning of this
time,
year, I
have
made
a
plans to start
company
the show,
at
and
is
now
flying.
it's a thing. It started
It's
first
Troy.
episode
Troy.
launched last Wednesday, and we're basically going to be doing sort of Dimension 20 style, where we're going to have it's a bunch of different adventures, and they're all each episode is about an hour, and there's about 4 or 5 episodes per adventure, so that way it's a little bit easier to be able to consume, and then so you don't have to worry about like subscribing to a long form campaign. And then the cool thing is, like, basically get to rotate a cast of character or rotate a cast of players who are also disabled in the space, that so people can be able to know them, and they get to create characters who are disabled in the space. And so it's a really great time, and I am absolutely having a blast with it, and I'm just it's been going great so far.
Yeah, I mean, the premiere was huge. You had a great tune in. That was huge to watch. They had a lot of folks come through, and I love the space that you're creating with a show like this, because when we think of a lot of what we see visibly on Twitch, a lot of it is art imitating art. And I will just say that when you tune into most broadcasts, when you look at the layouts, when you look at their setups, I saw somebody mention like the Pikachu and like the games and stuff that I have behind my setup. You have a similar with like Xbox and Master Chief and crew. And it's like, when you think of what we showcase on our shows, there's a lot of similarities that we have to how we execute. And when people say, "Oh, well, it's tough for people to discover me," having that little extra flavor of this is what I stand for, this is my purpose, this is the spin I'm putting on the show, is how an audience is actually going to attach themselves to you and continue to watch your programming, potentially sub, potentially support in other means. That's how that can occur. And by having like the little cues, that opens the conversation. So the Pikachu, obviously Pokemon will pop for me. Seeing the Xbox logo, okay, great. Yeah, let's talk about some of those early Xbox games or LAN parties and experiences. We have the introductions, but to get a person hooked onto you, you need to think more about that purpose statement of, well, why am I doing this show and how am I doing this show differently than the other executions that have happened prior to it. And so I love that with your show, you're approaching it with that intent of, yeah, there's lots of great D&D shows, but let's tell it in this way. I really
Yeah,
love it.
I always say that for anyone that wants to jump into the content creation world and become a content creator, as that is sort of seen as a career path that people can be able to take, and they're like, well, I don't really have like like I'm not like huge like a Pokimane or Shroud or even just us here but I always say, and I always tell my, like when I was teaching, I was always told my students, and this is something that my dad taught me, was if you're interested, you'll be interesting. And it really highlights that if you have a passion about something, there is going to be an audience for it, and you will be seen as interesting to that audience. You, whether it's like you said, it's Pokemon, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's Xbox, whether it's God of War, no matter what, like even if it's cars or sports, or even sewing, like whatever it is that you're interested in, there is that when you talk about it, there is that innate passion that comes across. Like people can smell the bullshit whenever you're sort of talking about stuff that you don't know anything about. But when you're talking about something that you're extremely passionate about and something that you love to talk about, that comes across and that makes you more interesting. That's why I always say, like, for those jumping, even just streaming on Twitch, you don't have to stream games if you don't want to. It's not the people are tuning in not for the games, they're tuning in for you. They're tuning in for the personality, you as a person, you as a unique a perspective on what it is that you're talking about or that you're streaming. Sure, yeah, the game is what brings people in to say, oh, this person's playing a Call of Duty right now, I should, I want to see what they're like. And then they jump in, they're like, oh, I like this person, I want to be able to see what more content they have. And you find that basically that day was the first day they played Call of Duty, but they've been an Apex Legends person, or they've just been jumping in, like they've been doing just chatting for a long time. You never know. But because you're interested in that person, now you're interested in their content. So when you're starting off, it's like, find the thing that you're interested and passionate about, because guaranteed there will be an audience out there that will find you interesting in what you're talking about.
That's right. That's right. And there's actually, like, as you're highlighting there, folks, like there's major established broadcasters, or like what we look to, like the Pokies of the world, or like the XQCs, like folks who have like the massive audiences, right? And this is something that, like, honestly, I see a lot when it comes into like our chat room. People are like, well, I'm a small streamer, or like, I'm not at that level.
I'm gonna say, never say you're a small streamer. You're a streamer. It doesn't matter how big or how small you are. You're a streamer, period.
that and it's like, remove small streamer from your vocabulary. It means nothing. And I usually highlight this, like, based on like followerships, rather, or like on YouTube it'd be called like subscriberships. There's a lot of people out there that have millions or hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and when you look at their average viewer, it ain't it, right? They're not millions of viewers there watching them. So this is where we start to like really start to internalize, well, what matters when it comes to the show. And it really is, well, who's showing up, who's supporting directly. If that's 10 people, wonderful. If it's one person, great. If it's 300,000, whatever it is, whoever's showing up, that is what is important to your base, and really focusing hard on that. So I want to encourage every person here to really start to rethink how we think about the space of who's large, who's small. Like, no, we're all creators. Every time we go live, we're on the same playing field. It's a matter of what are we creating?
Yeah, you think Pokimane didn't start off with having only just one viewer when she started? So everyone always starts off with at least having just one viewer. So and hey, and now she's exactly where she is today. And sure, there's other factors that come into play, and it's the timing, it's content, it's just the kind of the personality that she is. But like it does, and at the end of the day, people subscribe to Pokimane because she's Pokimane and she's like who she is. Like she is a great content creator and she's a great streamer. Same with anybody who got big, who is big on Twitch or just in content creation in general. It's they started off with at least one viewer and then they grew that. So why can't you? Why do you have to put yourself in that sort of like that comparison? Like you can do that same thing.
Yeah, there was actually a comment that I want to call forward from Huffy MD that said, calling yourself a streamer means nothing unless people watch you. Now, this is an interesting one to me because I would debate that the act of creation makes you, the individual. So, like, for example, an artist who paints a painting, if they put forward that painting and no one's purchased said painting, are they still an artist? Yes, they still created it. Now, could they call themselves a professional artist or a full-time artist? Unless somebody's purchasing the painting or repeated purchases, maybe they're not at the professional level yet, but they still are the artist. And so being a streamer, regardless of the viewership being inbound, the fact is you're putting a show out there. Now, when it comes to converting an audience inbound, that's where you have to be thinking about what are the marketing levers that you are pulling as a creator to get people into your door. The service will continue to exist. It allows you to ingest, it allows you to showcase your broadcast, but there's additional work that you have to do as a performer to get people in the door in the same way that if a major musician's performing, they're putting out their ads, they're showcasing, hey, I'm going to be at this venue on this date, buy a ticket to my show. A lot of those same things we see in traditional media apply here when it comes to building a base. You can't just create it and then hope they come. I think there's a lot of like worry there that like people think, oh, well, if I make it and they just don't come here, well, then that's it. I give up and walk away. I think there's additional levers that people should be thinking about.
For sure. Yeah. I always kind of see even just Twitch as sort of like the landing post for a lot of content creators. Like that is the thing where you are creating content from, you're streaming, like like everything that gets expanded beyond the Twitch stream is just trying to be able to get people to land back and come back to your stream and to your channel on Twitch. And I think I saw that it was Ray in the chat said, yeah, like it takes time. Like it really does take time. Like you never like, yeah, there are definitely the overnight successes, but I think it was a Markiplier that said it's like, yeah, it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. So it takes patience and it takes a long time, but there are not necessarily shortcuts, but there are ways to be able to get folks into your stream. It's like it's creating content on other platforms like TikTok or YouTube or on Instagram or whatever. It's about taking some of that content that you're already creating and streaming on Twitch, and you're putting them up onto other platforms as clips. Like I can't tell you, like over the course of the pandemic, or actually over the course of the past several years of streaming, I have found so many creators, not necessarily just because I was browsing through Twitch. It was because I found them on the platforms that I was on, and I tuned into their streams. Like I use the example of Ashley Roboto. She is an amazing streamer. I would not have known anything about her, and she lives not that far from me too. Like she's Canadian, and she lives like about less than an hour away from me, and yet I had no idea who she was until I saw her clips on TikTok. But she kept promoting it, like she had like a little thing on her that showed her Twitch channel, and I checked it out, and now I'm a big fan. I saw the same thing with Sweet Tales as well. Like a lot of creators can find success from getting people into your Twitch stream by utilizing the platforms that are available to you. It's not about necessarily being like, I mean, yes, of course, it'd be great if Twitch had a better discovery platform, and it is getting better. It's much better than it was several years ago, I can tell you that. But it is something that is harder to be able to find an audience specifically on Twitch. But that even if it was the best sort of discovery platform, you still need to be able to have those other places that you can be able to create content from. Because what happens if that platform just disappears? Not to say that I'm not hoping, knock on wood, that Twitch never will disappear anytime soon, but like if you have those multiple different channels of content, then you don't necessarily have to rely on just the one place, because then it's like, what happens? Like then you're stuck and you have to start all over again. And hey, I mean, John, like you do, I don't know about you, but I'm 40. Like I am in that space right
My
now.
birthday is this week, and my yes.
Oh, well, happy
Just to
birthday!
stay. Well, there it is. But I think what you're highlighting on is a very key point, because this is ultimately like the number of times that I've had to rebrand or relook at the content that I'm creating on the internet is so many, because of YouTube changing its algorithm policies, or it is highlighting a particular type of content and I need to focus on that type of content development there. Or when it comes to Twitch, like constant analysis of my belief, or at least what I've observed over the years, managing creators, working with creators, and one myself, is that every 4 years, your audience is going to phase out of you, because they're also going through a life shift. If they are in their teenage years, they're going to college. They're likely going to be watching other content. If they're in college, they're going to transition out of college after 4 years. They're going to be becoming an adult or going somewhere else, or they're getting married, or they're having kids. And so every 4 years, anticipate that there's an audience transfer. But when we're thinking about like how we are spending our time in creating into the spaces, this is something that you're going to have to be doing if you want this to be a career. And I assume, a lot of people who are watching, whether you are a broadcaster there or your viewer who supports another, you want to see your creator continue to evolve with you and evolve with the space, because the same stuff that we watched when we were younger, unlikely are continuing to watch it. I used to, what was his name? Green, who used to be over on MTV. He was the comedian on there. I used to think that he was one of the
Tom
funniest
Green?
guys. Tom Green. I thought he was so
Yeah.
funny. And then when I try to watch him now, I'm just like, wow, this does not hit anymore. And so there's things that just don't age with you. And so you have to think, as a broadcaster, what are the services that are growing with you? And I saw like there's some folks coming in saying, hey, go Kick. Hey, if you want to broadcast on Kick, great. If you want to broadcast on YouTube, great. If you want to broadcast on TikTok, great. There's nothing wrong with where you choose to build your home. But then choosing the right amount of time to spend on each of the services is the key to a successful business long term. You have to think, what is the right strategy for me? Is it Instagram, TikTok, reels, or like shorts and like putting stuff there, YouTube shorts, to then aid with the Twitch show? There's many different paths and equations that you can build. You just have to think, well, what is right for you?
Yeah.
And you can choose that.
And I think as well, like I think some folks are can be sort of scared or worried about whether they made the right choice about jumping onto platforms. I mean, heck, like when there was a period of time where I left Twitch to go stream on Mixer, and then that ended, and then I came back to Twitch just or shortly after. It's like I always will say, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you learn more from mistakes than you do necessarily from successes. Yes, successes are great, but when you start to kind of like, as you said, like after 4 years, when your audience kind of like is moving into either a different phase of their life and the audience is changing, you have to you can't just sort of rely on just what you started doing 4 years ago, because you also as a person have changed. Like like I know for like I would probably say and speculate that Ninja is probably, burnt out a lot from Fortnite, and but that's where, he started like 4 years ago and became extremely popular from that. And, I would even say like his audience has also moved on from just him being the Fortnite guy, as it were. So I always say, like, don't be afraid of failing. You have the opportunity to be able to try out different things. And if it doesn't work, it's okay. Learn from what you from those mistakes, and then try something else, or utilize the things that you learned and be able to move that into the next phase of that idea. I can't tell you how many things I have done in my content creation career that have failed spectacularly. Like I said, I started on YouTube in 2005. I didn't actually figure out what it is I wanted to do, which was Blind Gamer, until 2015, and I had 10 years of trying many many different things that did not work. Even things that like sort of worked for a little bit, but also failed because like as a fun little fact about me is that there was a period of time where I actually played with the idea of becoming a stand-up comedian because on my 30th birthday, I had a big, huge event and I started to tell stories and I on a stage in front of my family and friends, and I recorded that and put that out as a comedy album, and it actually became #2 on the iTunes comedy charts, beating out people like Louis C.K. and Hannibal Buress at the time. And I thought, oh, this is great. I'm going to jump into this now. I'm going to become like, I'm going to go into a bunch of different open mics and, start to be able to kind of my career at just, telling stories in a comedic fashion. My next show had 5 people. It bombed spectacularly. And then that lost me money too, because I had to rent out the venue for it. And but what I learned from that was just the idea of like, okay, I know how, if I wanted to, I can put out an album. I know how to do that now. I can take that and move that into maybe potentially a next thing. Now, granted, hey, I just pivoted and went a different direction, but I appreciate and never regret those failures because it helped me get to where I'm at now. And hey, I know I'm like 40. I don't have the time to be able to make those mistakes again. So I am very selective on what ideas I can do and what ideas I want to be able to do. But as those who are starting out, probably in their teens, early 20s, you have all the time in the world to be able to do whatever, fail, succeed, whatever. And it just it just comes from like, hey, try a thing. If it doesn't work and you're not a fan of doing it, take what you learned from that and then try a different thing. You can totally do that. And so don't feel bad about it, trying to hesitate of where you want to go next, because you never know.
That and I think it's a healthy reminder to every person here. There's always the comment that I'll see on Twitter that gets a lot of broadcasters kind of fired up, which is, oh, you fell off. People will say to them, oh, you fell off. But here's the thing, internet, and you need to understand this. And it's the same with every entertainment professional out there. Your career is a roller coaster. I've talked about this on all the other shows. It does this the rest of your life. It's going to be up and down waves. You're going to get the gig, then you're not going to get the gig. Then you're going to get the gig, then you're not going to get it. And the same thing with audience. The line doesn't always go up. Eventually, Mr. Beast will not be at the top of viewership on YouTube. That is a fact. It will happen. They will eventually have somebody else come and climb with their viewership. It's how it works across the entire space. So you have to be part of this, is the comfortability with, you may try a thing, it may fail. That's okay. Try another thing. Does that work? Okay, that's working a little bit better. Can you tweak it and make it a little bit more attractive for viewers coming inbound? These are all things that you have to fully internalize with yourself as you're going through this, if you want it to be a professional career path. Now, here's the thing. I know that there's also hobbyists. There's people who do it on the side. There's people who like to do it for fun. Nothing wrong with any of these pathways. But if you want it to be a professional career, you have to be comfortable with knowing that it is a roller coaster. You will have highs and you will have lows.
Yeah, I had that happen last year. I can't even count out, like, I barely streamed at all on Twitch last year, and part of it was part of how the video game industry was, and there wasn't really a lot of consulting that was happening, so it was a very down year for me, and it was tough. Like when you're trying to be able to deal with that, but then also trying to be able to be on and trying to be able to create content, it definitely can be tough, and I was definitely not pulling in the views and the audience that I used to. And I think, that was kind of like the beginning of sort of the folks who were really jumping in because of the pandemic, and they were watching as much as possible because that was all that was available at the time, because we were all at home, we're either working from home or just at home in general. So I had to kind of really figure out what it was, that not necessarily like it was anything wrong with specifically me, or that it was the content, specifically the content that I was putting out there, but it was sort of like, okay, what do I want to be able to focus in on, and allow me actually that time to be able to analyze what kind of content I personally want to be able to create. It's not like, yes, you can just sort of like, and I can utilize the analytics of being like, okay, these streams did well, these streams didn't, but there is something there that I still like. Like, it's being able to utilize those analytics in a way that, yes, being able to try to find ways to figure out what is sort of popping off on your stream, being like, okay, if it's a specific game or a specific time of day, yes, those can definitely help with that analytics. But I use my analytics in a way that it sort of try to reinforces, or and also that kind of can pull away from what type of content do I personally want to be able to create. And I realized that the gaming side at the time was very hard for me to be able to to be able to gain an audience. So I switched over to just chatting instead. Now but then this year I'm also looking into getting back into gaming. So as you said, it's peaks and valleys. There's every content creator always goes through it, but the thing that you learn as a content creator is that you just have to be patient and weather that out. But also, it take that time when you're in those valleys of analyzing what it is that you like to do, and then analyze what did well, and then try to blend the two together to be like, okay, I like doing this, and the audience seemed to really like this as well. I'm gonna move forward with this, and it could be different than than anything else you've done or been known for. And but like that, but you can tell, again, it's going back to that you're interested in you're interesting, because then you can tell, the audience can tell you're much happier than you are like doing that thing that you like, than necessarily being like, oh, I'm just gonna keep playing Fortnite because that's the thing that I'm known for.
Oh man, and I see that happen a ton, where people fall into singular category and then they get locked into it. And let's say their interest in the game is waning, or even the game's viewership is waning, and then you start to see this like questioning of, well, where do I go from here? And you just have to be comfortable with being able to pivot and knowing that it may dip time to time. There was a comment from, let's see if I can find it here. I think it was Malik who had commented, uh, not to get discouraged when your numbers drop. It happens to everyone. You just got to tweak your content a little. And now there's two components to that. There is obviously the tweaking of the content that may need to happen, is like, okay, I'm creating a show that maybe isn't entertaining, or I am maybe not paying enough attention. I notice this, for example, if I'm playing a competitive game, I'm not engaging with the chat. So you're really just kind of observing. And my competitive play, as we're talking about our age, I feel like this is like what is it, like the care home broadcast today with how we talk about ourselves. But it's, my competitive skills are not on the same level as when I was 20 years prior. So you're tuning in for me, and if I'm not engaging, then why would you continue to watch? It may cause a dip in the content. Now that's a content shift you can do. Then there's also the other factor that none of us have any control over, and that's whether or not the viewer can show up that day at that time. Your viewer has their own life. They have their own things going on. They may have it set in their schedule of like, oh, I can't wait to watch you today, or I really want to show up and support, but perhaps they're just not able to. That is something outside of your control. So I liked a person, actually, a few people had mentioned they turn off their view count when they're broadcasting. That can allow you to really create a great show regardless of the viewership. So if you're doing a great show, even if it was for a few small viewers, if they were to, new viewers were to find you, you're doing a great show, there's a higher likelihood they're going to follow and convert. So it helps you with that prep.
Yeah, I always say, like, whenever you're starting something new or you're trying something different, give it a chance, or like basically break it down to being like, okay, if 4 or 5 episodes or 4 or 5 streams.
Maybe. wear this. What was that? Hey. Sound like fucking. Sound like my dogs were more. I was like, whoa. They better not be. You think I can do it? Oh, I thought she was gonna take a shit. I was like, girl.
Hospitalized because I was burnt out from the stuff that I was creating. I legitimately almost passed out. I passed out on a subway platform. I could have fell on the tracks. That's how bad it got. And I basically had to realize that I had to find that work-life balance and find the thing that I was more passionate about than necessarily just the thing that I was just doing for other things and not for myself.
So you hit on a few good things here. And actually, Moonberry double tapped in the chat. Think about this. Would you watch your own stream? If not, you probably should change what you're doing. And I think it's something that everybody should get in the practice of, because if you can tune into a stream and enjoy it, like I like to go back and watch my DJ sets, especially when I'm like, oh, this is flowing well. I really like this mix. I like what I did there. I can see myself having fun. Those are fun for me to go back and watch. If it's, you know, a very dull broadcast or something that, like, honestly, like the audience convinced me to do and I'm not proud of it, I think part of it is like, would you go back and watch your stream? But also, can you stomach the content you're creating? Like, are you proud of what you're creating? And that will also carry forward, because there's different ways of identification of success. We were talking about different success metrics in terms of viewership and stuff earlier, but success can come from personal growth on the broadcast, not just the data and the analytics. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you an example. I had shifted my content at one point to focus on my Japanese language learning, because that is something of which I want. Like, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. I never had the opportunity to learn another language. I do a lot of business with groups out in Japan. One of my main sponsors is Sanrio. I want to be able to speak Japanese. And so I dedicated my broadcast to learning that. So whether or not the viewership was successful, I am still gaining something as a person.
Too much fat.
Same thing can apply if you're a speedrunner. If you're constantly practicing the same game over and over, and actually those practice runs are going to better your eventual big show that you're doing, that is something of which you can find as a success for you. So know that success doesn't always tie to just the metrics, the viewership, the money. It can be in personal growth, and that is a choice that you can make when it comes to your broadcast. So something to think about as you're approaching your next show.
It's really
we're rapidly approaching the end of our show now. So I do want to ask a question. It's sort of like a follow-up and like a condensing of everything we talked about today, which is,
eggs are very
if
high in
the
fat,
streamers
especially
present, the
mayonnaise,
viewers
and
present could
I
do
felt
one thing
that feeling where I
to
felt like I was
encourage
zoned out and tired and just really
a
weird,
more
and my stomach
mindful
was
approach
upset.
to the space,
So I
whether that's
drank a Red
considerations for
Bull,
accessibility,
and
how to invite people
it
into a
actually
community,
helped.
how they're present in broadcast. Like, what is something a person could do and take away from today's show and do in other people's shows as they hop chat to chat?
Ooh, interesting. I think from a for obviously, yes, from an accessibility standpoint, yes, like as a broadcaster, try to be able to make your streams as accessible as possible, because you never know who is going to show up in your chat. And especially for those who are either blind or deaf or hard of hearing, having captions or being able to describe what it is that is happening on screen when asked is helpful, and to being able to have that connection with that streamer or with that audience member. But I think as well, if you're definitely, like, one thing is I kind of like to say, this is something I learned in radio as well, is that it can feel like at times when you're behind the mic that you're not talking to anybody.
Hi, I'm Steve Taylor.
Like
I'm
it could
blind,
have seemed
and
like you know you know that there's people out there, but they, you know, like whether or not they're listening or watching, you may not know. So what I kind of like to say is that to help out with that is that, you know, have a picture of like your best friend or someone that is a loved one that you love to meet, like you are so much yourself when you're like when you're talking to them, and have a picture of them just kind of like either below camera or just off to the side, and then pretend you're just talking to that person. Like
Hi,
that
I'm
not
Steve
only
Taylor.
shows
I'm
your
blind,
personality
and I
and who
play
you are as a person in real life than just, you know, on camera versus off camera, but it really kind of
Hi,
helps
I'm
to
Steve Taylor. I'm
lessen
blind,
the
and I
idea
play
of,
video games.
oh, I'm on camera, I gotta be on, and you know, just being yourself. Because being yourself is what is the thing that's gonna get people to interested in watching you and showcasing your personality. You don't need you don't necessarily need a gimmick or like a jumping into sort of the trending things that, you know, people are streaming in order to be able to become a content creator. You can become a content creator just by being yourself. And I know that sounds cliche, and you know, there's a lot of people that sort of suggest that, but it's being like there's only one person in the world that can be you, and that's you. And so just try to be able to create the content that you want to be able to create. I know that answers the question, but it's the thing that kind of came to mind at the moment.
I think you gave a great recommendation for folks to ground themselves, because we hear that a lot. Be yourself, and it's like, well, who am I? Can be some people saying, or like, I am being myself. Why is it not working? And so, being yourself, the hope is that by you being yourself, there is a relatability factor that other people can identify within. In the same way that if you ask a friend after they went to see a movie, let's say, you know, recent Godzilla Kong movie came out, should I go see that? If you ask your friend and they say, you know what, you should, you'll trust them more than likely than somebody else. And so it's the same type of concept where if you personalize it to the concept of who do you trust, who would you listen to, and try to perform in that way that you're not basically putting up an air or a falsehood of who you are. That's why placing a picture can help ground you. There's another thing that you can implement, and definitely, I know right now we have 12,000 viewers watching us. Thank you, by the way, everybody who joined us for today's chat. When you think of the scale of potential viewers inbound, you will have those that are there for you, and then there are those, you know, sometimes coming from the internet that want to detract you, criticize, demean, get you out, right? And I see, you know, a few of those came through today's show, and okay, they'll go to another section of the internet because this isn't for them. But something that can wear creators down is criticism. And so in the same way that you'd be placing a photo of, let's say, a relative or a friend or somebody that you can consistently feel comfortable with, I recommend writing 5 names on a piece of paper of people whose opinion truly matters to you. And I mean, these are people that said, you know, if they came up to you and they're like, you know what, John, that shirt, we need to get rid of that shirt. And if it's just like, okay, you know what, I trust their opinion, I will get rid of that shirt. If it's one of those 5 people on the list, take their criticism. If criticism comes from the internet and they aren't one of those 5 people, don't listen to it. And that comes from Brene Brown. Reading one of her books, she was talking about this, is what is the criticism that you will take? And she speaks about the concept of the man in the arena, they call it. If a person is a fellow broadcaster and has done what you've done, like Steve, like you grew up in a similar circuit I did. We have a lot of shared similar professional experience. If you were to give me feedback, I will take that feedback gladly because I know you lived a similar experience to me. If a person who doesn't have that lived experience gives me criticism, I likely won't take it with as much of a regard. So same thing goes to all of you that are broadcasting. Be mindful of what criticism you're letting into you throughout this entire journey. So really think about that. All right. Well, we are at time, but I want Steve one more time for you to tell about your new show. When can they find it? When can they tune in and check you out?
Yeah, you can be able to find Dungeons and Disableds at dungeonsanddisableds.com, or search for it on any podcast service, or it's available on YouTube as well. But also every Wednesday night, we will have a watch party where we get to broadcast the next episode of the adventure, and you can be able to jump in. We do a pre-show every Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, 3:30 p.m. Pacific time, and then we do a watch party for the episodes. About an hour long, so you don't have to stick around for a couple hours as some other actual plays are. But you can be able to jump on in, and we also will have an after show with myself and some members of the cast and answer any questions that you have. So yeah, make sure to go check it out, dungeonsanddisableds.com, or just search for Dungeons Disabled, and hope to be able to hear what you think of the show.
Y'all go follow Steve Saylor if you haven't already. Make sure you tune into that show. Catch up with them on all of their broadcasts. I'll be live later today on /Kawaii Guy with a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Shield, which will go incredibly smoothly. I can guarantee it. Ray, we'll need your help. We're going to find somebody to raid, so keep hanging out and chat, y'all. We're going to raid another broadcaster here on Twitch. I appreciate you all joining for today's Let's Chat, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Work a lot on
Oh, Vanni, figlio. Figlio, ciao figlio. Figlio, che sta a fa? Ah, niente, sto a fa... Sto sentendo alcune cose. Sto sentendo alcune cose. Sto sentendo alcune cose, alcune cose. Alcune cose. No, aspetta un attimo. Vado così. Ho sentito in inglese la live di Twitch. Non ha risposto perché è tardi. Vabbè. Mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia, mamma mia. Aspetta un attimo.
Lentissimo.
A Trapani? Vengono a Trapani il 24 maggio. Vengono a Trapani il 24 maggio. Wow! Vengono a Trapani il 24 maggio. Bene, bene, bene. Bene, bene, bene. Vediamo. Vediamo. 'Che si fa? Ah, ah, ah. 24 maggio. 24 maggio. È un venerdì. Peccato che non posso partecipare. Siamo vicini. «24 maggio saranno a Trapani, vicino a me, Vicino a me saranno. Vicino a me. Ma non penso che verranno qua. Infatti, sì. Buonanotte ragazzi, buonanotte, buonanotte, buonanotte. Buonanotte.